the ruthless mafia king who lost his heart to a village girl. The first time Armand DeLuca saw her, she was standing barefoot in the dust. It irritated him, not the girl, the dust. It clung to his polished shoes like disrespect. He had built an empire that bowed at his whisper. Entire districts shifted when he approved a deal. Men twice his size trembled when he went silent. And yet here he was, stepping out of a black armored vehicle in the middle of a forgotten village road because one of his supply routes had been compromised. The village was small, wooden houses, rusted zinc roofs, children chasing tires with sticks, and in the center of it all stood a girl arguing with one of his men. Armand paused. No one argued with his men, especially not like that. "You can't just take the land," she was saying. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "This field feeds 3 families. You'll leave nothing behind." The soldier, big, impatient, laughed. "Little girl, do you know who owns this land now?" She lifted her chin. "Not you." The soldier's hand twitched toward his gun. Armand's voice cut through the air like a blade. "That's enough." Silence fell instantly. His men straightened. The villagers froze. The girl turned slowly. She didn't bow. She didn't gasp. She looked at him as if he were simply another man in expensive clothes, standing in the sun. Armand noticed that immediately. Her eyes were dark and clear. No fear, just fire. "Are you the one they're afraid of?" she asked him. The audacity nearly amused him. "Yes," he said calmly. She studied him for a long second. "Then you should know fear doesn't grow crops." A few of his men shifted, waiting for the order. Armand should have crushed the defiance. He should have reminded the village why his name carried weight. Instead, he asked, "What is your name?" She hesitated only briefly. "Elena." He nodded once, then turned to his men. "We'll renegotiate the land." The soldier blinked. "Sir?" Did I stutter? "No." The men stepped back. Elena watched him with something unreadable in her gaze. Armand walked back to his car without another word, but as the engine started and the vehicle rolled away, he found himself glancing through the tinted window. She was still watching him, and for the first time in years, something inside him felt unsettled. Armand DeLuca had built his empire from blood and silence. At 28, he controlled ports, shipping lines, politicians, and half the city's underground trade. He was not reckless. He was not loud. He was precise. Precision had kept him alive when his father was assassinated. Precision had helped him dismantle rival families. Precision ensured no one betrayed him twice. Love did not fit into precision. Love made men careless. His father had loved his mother deeply. It had made him merciful. It had made him hesitate, and hesitation had gotten him killed. Armand learned young, affection was leverage. He never dated publicly, never kept one woman long enough to matter. He didn't drink excessively, didn't gamble emotionally. Everything was controlled. Except now, days after that encounter, he found himself asking about a village girl. "She lives with her grandmother," one of his informants reported. "Parents died when she was young. She grows vegetables, helps at the clinic sometimes. No record, no debts, no ambition, no hidden motive. Just a village girl." It irritated him more than the dust. Elena didn't expect him to return. Men like him didn't come back to places like this. But 3 days later, the black vehicle rolled into the village again. This time there were no soldiers stepping out first. Just him, alone. The villagers watched from doorways. Elena stood near the well, arms crossed. "You forgot something?" she asked when he approached. "Yes," he said. Her eyebrow lifted. "I forgot to ask why you weren't afraid." She tilted her head. "Should I be?" "Most people are." She studied him again, slower this time. "Fear is useful when there's something to lose." "And you have nothing to lose?" "I have my grandmother, and this land. But I don't believe you'd hurt me without reason." That almost made him smile. "You assume I need reason." "Everyone does," she replied quietly. "Even monsters." The word should have angered him. Instead, it stirred something strange. He stepped closer. Up close, he could see the faint scar on her cheek, the calluses on her hands. She didn't step back. "Do you think I'm a monster?" he asked softly. "I think you've convinced yourself you have to be." Silence stretched between them. For the first time in years, Armand felt exposed. He wasn't used to being seen. "I have business nearby," he said finally. "I'll be here for a few days." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." And then he walked away again. Elena watched him go, confused by the way her heart had started beating faster. He kept returning, sometimes to inspect land deals, sometimes without explanation. They talked by the well, under a tree, near the clinic. She asked questions no one else dared to ask. "Do you sleep well? Do you ever regret anything? Is it lonely?" He deflected at first. Then, gradually, he stopped, because she didn't look at him like the others did. No reverence, no greed, no terror, just curiosity. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the sky, she asked, "Why are you really here?" He was sitting on a wooden bench, jacket discarded beside him. "I wanted to see if you would still speak to me." She frowned. "Why wouldn't I? People change when they realize who I am." "I know who you are." "You know what I am," she nodded. "And you're still here." "Yes." He leaned back slowly. "You're not afraid I'll ruin your life?" She met his gaze. "Are you planning to?" "No." "Then I'm not afraid." It was that simple for her. For him, nothing was ever simple. The rumors started within weeks. The ruthless king visiting a village girl. His captains noticed the changes first. He was distracted during meetings, less patient with unnecessary violence. One of his oldest advisors pulled him aside. "She's a weakness," the man warned. "She's a human being," Armand replied coldly. "That's worse." Armand knew the truth of it. His enemies would notice soon, and they would strike where he was softest. He told himself he would end it, cut ties, return to precision. Instead, he found himself bringing Elena books, medical supplies for the clinic, fixing the well pump quietly without taking credit. "You're not as heartless as you pretend," she told him one afternoon. "I don't pretend," he replied. She smiled faintly. "You do, but not with me." Her smile unsettled him more than any threat ever had. The attack came on a gray morning. Armand was in the city when he got the call. Rival faction, small unit, targeting the village, targeting her. His blood went cold. He left the meeting mid-sentence. His men scrambled as he barked orders. By the time he arrived, smoke was rising. 2 houses burned, villagers huddled in panic. He stepped out of the vehicle with murder in his eyes. "Where is she?" No one answered at first. Then he saw her. Elena was kneeling beside an injured child, hands covered in blood, not her own. Relief hit him so hard it almost weakened his knees. She looked up when she felt him approach. "You brought this," she said quietly. "No accusation, just fact. His jaw tightened. They'll pay. That won't rebuild the houses. They'll pay, he repeated, voice deadly calm. She stood slowly. Is this what your world is? So retaliation and ashes? Yes, she held his gaze. Then I don't belong in it. The words struck deeper than any blade. I never wanted you in it, he said. But I am. Silence. Smoke drifted between them. For the first time, Armand realized the cost wasn't just blood, it was her. That night, he made a decision that shook the underworld. Instead of retaliating quietly, he called a public summit. All rival leaders present. No guns allowed. When he entered the room, the air thickened. You attacked civilians, he said without preamble. You touched something that belongs to me. A murmur rippled. One man laughed. The village girl. You've grown sentimental. Armand walked forward slowly. I'm giving you one chance. Hand over the men responsible. And if we don't? He didn't blink. Then I dismantle everything you've built. They tested him. He followed through. Within weeks, their shipping lines collapsed, their warehouses raided, their alliances severed. Not with brute chaos, with surgical precision. It was brutal. It was beautiful. And it was entirely for her. Elena watched the consequences unfold from afar. The violence in the city escalated before it settled. One evening, Armand arrived at her door, alone again. She opened it slowly. You ended them, she said. Yes. Because of me? Because they crossed a line. Her eyes searched his face. You changed the rules. I can change more. Can you? She whispered. He stepped closer. I don't know how to be gentle, he admitted. But I know I don't want a world where you're afraid. Her breath hitched slightly. You scare me sometimes, she confessed. He nodded once. I know. But you also protect. He didn't speak. She reached out hesitantly, brushing her fingers against his hand. It was the first time she had touched him. His entire body stilled. He could command armies without blinking, but that small touch nearly undid him. I don't want you to burn the world for me, she said softly. I just want you to choose something different. Different how? Choose not to be what hurt you. The words lingered. He had built himself from pain. She was asking him to rebuild. Months passed. Armand divided his time carefully. City and village, power and peace. He began restructuring parts of his empire, legitimate investments, gradual withdrawal from the most violent sectors. His captains grumbled but obeyed. They saw something in his eyes they had never seen before, purpose beyond domination. Elena visited the city once. He showed her the skyline from his balcony. This is what you rule? She asked. For now. And what do you want? He looked at her instead of the buildings. You. She swallowed. That's not something you can own. I know. Then what do you mean? He stepped closer. I want to deserve you. It was the most honest thing he had ever said, but love did not erase enemies. One last betrayal surfaced from within his own ranks. A trusted captain, resentful of change, aligned with a rival group. The plan was simple. Kidnap her, force Armand back into full brutality. The attempt failed. Armand intercepted the plan minutes before execution. The betrayal broke something in him. He had tried to evolve. The world had answered with treachery. He stood over the traitor in a dim warehouse. You think she made me weak, Armand said quietly. She did, the man spat. Armand tilted his head slightly. No, she made me selective. The punishment was swift, but not reckless, not savage, precise. When it was done, Armand felt no triumph, only clarity. He would protect her, but he would not let love destroy him. On a quiet evening beneath the same tree where they first truly spoke, Armand knelt. The village froze, the ruthless king on one knee in the dust. "Elena," he said, voice steady but raw, "I cannot promise you a life without shadows, but I promise you I will never let those shadows swallow you." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want your empire," she whispered. "Good. I'm tired of it." A faint laugh broke through her emotion. "Then what do you want?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring. "Build something new. With me." She stared at him, at the man who once terrified cities, now vulnerable before her. "Yes," she said. The word changed everything. Years later, people still spoke of Armand DeLuca, but differently. He was no longer just the ruthless king. He became the man who reshaped an empire quietly. Investments turned legitimate, violence reduced strategically, power maintained but refined. He was still feared, but he was no longer hollow. And in a small village that once stood trembling under his shadow, a garden flourished beside a rebuilt clinic. Elena walked through it every morning. Armand sometimes followed, suit jacket abandoned, sleeves rolled up awkwardly as he tried to help with soil he once dismissed as dust. "You still hate the dirt?" she teased one day. He looked at his stained hands. "No," he said softly. He looked at her. "It's where everything worth keeping grows." And for the first time in his life, the ruthless king understood. Power built empires, but love built him. The seasons changed, but the village remembered the day the ruthless king knelt in the dust. Some people still whispered when Armand DeLuca's black vehicles appeared at the edge of the road. Children stopped their games to stare. Older villagers watched from their porches with careful eyes. Power like his did not disappear overnight, but Elena had learned something the others had not yet understood. The man who stepped out of those vehicles now carried soil on his shoes more often than blood on his hands. And that changed everything. At first, Armand struggled with the quiet life. He had spent most of his adult years surrounded by noise, meetings, gunfire, engines, seen negotiations whispered behind locked doors. His mind had always moved 10 steps ahead of danger. Silence felt unfamiliar. One morning, Elena found him sitting on the wooden bench near the clinic before sunrise. He was staring at the mountains beyond the fields. "You're awake early," she said gently. "I didn't sleep." She sat beside him. "Nightmares?" "No." He hesitated. "I'm not used to peace." Elena studied him carefully. "You survived chaos for years. Of course, peace feels strange." Armand leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "In my world, quiet meant someone was planning something. And here?" He looked at the waking village. "Here it just means the sun is coming up." She smiled softly. "Give it time." Time, however, had never been something Armand trusted easily, because while he was learning how to live differently, the world he once ruled had not forgotten him. Far away in the city, men watched carefully. Some respected his transformation. Others saw opportunity. Power vacuums were dangerous things. When Armand withdrew from certain sectors of the underworld, smaller groups rushed in to fill the space. Smuggling rings reappeared. Illegal ports began operating again under reckless leadership. Where Armand had once ruled with precision, chaos now threatened to spread. His former advisors brought him reports. Crime rates are climbing, one warned during a meeting in the city penthouse. Armand stood at the window overlooking the skyline. And they're testing your absence. He said nothing. Some think you've grown soft. At that, Armand finally turned. His expression was calm, but the room grew colder instantly. I didn't disappear, he said quietly. They know that. Do they? The advisor swallowed. Armand had reduced violence, but no one who truly understood him believed he had lost his edge. He simply used it differently now. Still, the problem continued growing. Because Armand had changed, but the underworld had not. One evening, Elena visited the city again. She stood on the balcony beside him, watching the lights stretch endlessly across the horizon. It's beautiful, she said. It's dangerous, Armand replied. You say that about everything. Because most things are. She leaned against the railing. Is that why you're thinking so hard tonight? He looked at her. You notice everything. You're easy to read when you pretend you're not. He sighed. There are problems in the city. There are always problems. These are different. Elena turned to face him fully. Then tell me. Armand rarely shared the burdens of his empire, but with her he found himself speaking. Without structure, violence spreads. Smaller factions are fighting for control. And they expect you to return? Yes. And will you? He hesitated. That depends. On what? On whether I can control it without becoming what I was. Elena stepped closer. You don't have to become the old version of yourself to protect people. It's not that simple. Maybe not, she said, but maybe the world needs the man you are now more than the man you used to be. Her words lingered long after the conversation ended. The next week, Armand made another decision that surprised everyone. Instead of reclaiming control through violence, he reshaped the power structure. He invited city officials, business leaders, and even some former rivals into a new system of agreements. Legal shipping investments, community infrastructure, employment programs. It was not charity, it was strategy. When people had something to lose, they protected stability, and stability reduced chaos. Not everyone liked the changes, but slowly the city began adapting. Armand remained powerful, yet his influence became quieter, more refined, more dangerous in its own way. Meanwhile, life in the village continued growing. The clinic expanded, the fields produced more crops each year, and Elena became someone the villagers trusted deeply. One afternoon, while she organized supplies inside the clinic, an elderly woman approached her. You've changed him, the woman said. Elena shook her head gently. No. Everyone says the ruthless king softened because of you. Elena smiled faintly. He softened because he wanted to. The woman nodded slowly. Still, love helps. Elena couldn't argue with that, but even love could not prevent every shadow. Late one night, Armand received a message from one of his oldest contacts. A name appeared on the screen, a name he had not heard in years. Marco Ventresca, a man thought long gone. Marco had once been part of a rival syndicate destroyed during Armand's rise to power. But apparently, he had survived, and now he had returned. The message was simple. You built a kingdom, then you abandoned it. I plan to take what you left behind. Armand read the message twice. Then he deleted it. But the threat was real. Marco was not reckless. He was patient, which meant he would not attack immediately. He would wait, study, plan, and eventually strike. Armand stood alone in the dark office for a long time, because this time the threat was not just to his empire, it was to his new life. The next morning he returned to the village earlier than expected. Elena was watering plants outside the clinic when she saw him walking down the dirt path. "You're back already?" she asked. "Yes." "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't." She set the watering can aside. "What happened?" He paused, then told her the truth. When he finished, Elena remained silent for a moment. Then she asked calmly, "Are we in danger?" "Yes." "Then what are you going to do?" Armand studied her face. In the past, he would have answered instantly. Destroy the threat. Erase the enemy. But now, "I'm going to stop him," he said. "How?" "Carefully." She stepped closer. "I trust you." Those 3 words carried more weight than any army he had ever commanded. For years, Armand had ruled through fear. Now he fought for something entirely different, and that made him more dangerous than ever. Because this time he wasn't protecting power. He was protecting a future, and men who fight for the future rarely lose. Far away in the city, Marco Ventresca studied photographs of the village, of the clinic, of Elena, and of Armand standing beside her in the garden. Marco smiled slowly. "Every king has a weakness," he murmured. But what Marco did not yet understand was this. Elena was not Armand's weakness. She was the reason he had become unstoppable. And when Marco finally made his move, the world would learn that the ruthless king still existed. He had simply learned something far more powerful than fear. He had learned what it meant to fight for love. And men who fight for the future are far more dangerous than men who fight only for power. Armand understood that better than anyone. In his younger years, every battle had been about dominance, territory, reputation, control. Those were simple wars, brutal but predictable. This one was different. Marco Ventresca was not attacking an empire. He was attacking the life Armand had chosen after it, and that made the game far more personal. Armand returned to the city the next morning. His penthouse office had not changed. The glass walls still looked out over the endless skyline. Ships still crawled slowly through the harbor far below. The same desk, the same quiet hum of power in every corner of the room. But the man standing there was not the same ruler who once controlled the city with iron silence. His advisors gathered cautiously around the table. Some had served him for over a decade. They had seen him dismantle families twice his size without raising his voice. They had watched entire criminal networks collapse simply because Armand DeLuca decided they would. But today they sensed something new. Focus. A colder, sharper version of the man they knew. "Ventresca is rebuilding alliances," one advisor reported. "Small crews, former smugglers, black market brokers, nothing large yet. He's moving quietly," another added, "testing reactions." Armand listened without interrupting. Then he spoke. "No retaliation." The room fell silent. One captain frowned. "Sir, if we wait, he grows stronger." Armand's gaze shifted to him. "Ventresca expects the old response," he said calmly. "Violence, territory fights, blood. And we won't give it to him? No." He tapped the table once. "We remove his resources instead." The strategy unfolded quickly. Legal investigations reopened against companies secretly funding Ventresca's operations. Shipping routes he depended on suddenly became unavailable. Ports tightened security. Bank accounts froze. Armand had once ruled the underworld. Now he understood the power of the world above it. Within 3 weeks, Ventresca's network began collapsing before it could even form. Smugglers lost contracts, partners disappeared, suppliers vanished. But Marco Ventresca was not a fool. He understood exactly who was responsible, so he made one final move. A desperate one. Late one evening, one of Armand's security teams intercepted a small convoy heading toward the village road. Armed, hidden plates, professional. Ventresca had decided to skip the chess game. He would strike directly. Armand arrived before the convoy reached the village. The confrontation happened on the same quiet road where Armand had first stepped into the dust years earlier. The headlights of both vehicles lit the empty fields. Marco Ventresca stepped out slowly, older than Armand remembered, but the same calculating eyes. "So is true," Marco said with a thin smile. "The great Armand DeLuca, guarding a village road." Armand stood still. "You should have stayed buried," he replied. Marco laughed softly. "You ruled the city like a king. Then you walked away for a girl." "I didn't walk away," Armand said calmly. "I evolved," Marco gestured toward the fields. "You traded an empire for vegetables." Armand didn't respond. Marco's expression hardened. "You made a mistake showing weakness." Armand finally stepped forward. "Protecting something isn't weakness." The silence stretched. Then Marco sighed. "You could have ruled everything." "I already did." "And you gave it up?" "No," Armand said quietly. "I kept what mattered." Marco studied him carefully. For a moment it almost looked like understanding crossed his face. But pride was stronger. He reached slowly toward the gun at his side. Armand moved faster, not with rage, not with chaos. Just the same precise efficiency that had once made him the most feared man in the city. The confrontation ended in seconds. When it was over, the night returned to silence. Armand stood alone on the road for a moment, breathing slowly. The last ghost of his past had finally disappeared. By the time the sun rose, he was already back in the village. Elena found him sitting beneath the same tree where they had shared so many conversations. "You're home early," she said. He looked up at her. "Yes?" She studied his face. "It's over. It's over." She sat beside him quietly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Birds moved through the branches above them. Wind carried the smell of soil and fresh leaves. The simple sounds of a life that once would have seemed impossible for a man like Armand DeLuca. Finally, Elena asked softly, "Do you miss it?" "The Empire?" She nodded. Armand looked out across the fields. Children were running near the well. Farmers were already beginning their work. Real life, real people, real peace. Then he looked back at her. "No," he said, "because the only thing I ever really built," he reached for her hand, "was the chance to stand here." Elena smiled. And somewhere far away in the city that once feared his name, Armand DeLuca's empire continued running quietly. Legitimate, structured, stable. He was still powerful, still respected, still someone no wise enemy would ever challenge. But now, when people spoke of Armand DeLuca, they no longer described only the ruthless king who ruled through fear. They spoke of the man who had rewritten his own story, the man who walked away from endless war, the man who chose a future instead of a throne. And every morning in that quiet village, the former king could sometimes be found in the garden beside the clinic, hands covered in dirt, listening to Elena laugh, finally understanding that the greatest victory of his life had never been conquering the world. It had been learning how to live in it.